Hi guys, and welcome to the 21st episode of Dreamers and Doers, where I interview people who follow their passion and try to make the world a better place. I think meditation has a role to play in it. So thank you, Georgia, to be with us today.
My pleasure.
So Georgia is a Vedic meditation teacher, and last weekend we were doing a course by your meditation teacher, Tom Knowles, who's quite a renowned Vedic meditation teacher. Mm-hmm. Super interesting, and so I met Georgia there, and yeah, it's like a lot of knowledge there, and I was really interested to. I mean, I think sometimes I don't feel like a strong vocation, so I don't think it'd be right, or at least now. But I'd be really interested sometimes in. I've thought of do I want to do a teacher training, because I think there's a lot of things that I think help for elevating the consciousness of the world, let's say, and I find meditation to be probably the biggest one. So, yeah, what's your journey towards starting meditation? How old were you when you started? Were you raised in a meditation-friendly environment? Or?
No.
Okay.
Very far from that.
Okay.
Not in a bad way, just wouldn't say that would have been a go-to in our family. I just grew up in New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand.
Hey, Joshua.
And I got into corporate life. I worked in insurance for 12 years in senior executive roles in business development and things like that. And I guess where things started was, I'm kind of not one of the last, but amongst the last people that you would expect to have become a meditation teacher. At least that's what my friends tell me.
But do you find that the fact that you actually come from a background that's kind of more standard Western education and job makes that people can resonate better with you?
Absolutely, yeah. That's why
what I feel too.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people come and learn with me, because they see that I'm sort of grounded. I know their lifestyle. It's about achieving our maximum potential.
Olivia, yes.
Achieving our maximum potential in life. It's not necessarily. I think there are some misconceptions about meditation out there, which might be that you learn to meditate and then you just become so chilled out, man, that you give up all your possessions and move to the Himalayas, rather than what is a common experience for people that practice Vedic meditation, which is that they find that their focus at work improves, creativity improves, which is one of the most common things my students tell me, particularly after they've been practicing for a while. One of the things they notice early on is improved creativity, and there's mechanics around why that occurs, and we can get into that, but people generally, the things that people are focusing on and having trouble with in life is they're not sleeping well, or they're feeling tired, or they just want a bit more energy, or they feel like they've got to a point in life where they're not really sure what the next step is. They want some clarity. Whilst meditation is expanding our consciousness, and it naturally produces better social behavior, because we know when we're not tired and we feel good, then we're just a happier person. We're nice to the person that serves us the coffee, and we say hello and we look in the eyes. And when we're tired and stressed, then we're on the phone and we go into literally tunnel vision, which is one of the biological functions that occurs when we're in fight or flight mode. So it does produce those things, but the things that people generally are focused on is those basics of just, I can't remember things now, my mind is foggy, I've got 3 kids and I'm just so tired, and I've got lots of mums who meditate who you would think, where are they going to fit the time in for the day? But because they get so much energy and they're more present and available to their children, they don't want to be snapping at them. But sometimes the stresses go up and we're just sort of tipped over the edge. So, I think the fact that my life has been in that zone, and a corporate life and all of those things, I understand the pressures, the pressures of of targets and what it's like to work in that environment, what it's like to fit meditation into a lifestyle like that, which again, it's like the biggest questions are, what will it do for me? Will I sort of become so chilled out that I won't have any drive? How will I fit it in? Those kind of things.
That was what I was writing here actually, because a lot of people, they're worried about it. It's like, am I going to lose my drive?
Yeah. And there is a misconception that we need to be stressed to have drive, that we need adrenaline and cortisol in order to achieve. And actually, there have been studies done on the optimal mental state in which to make decisions. And this is again why we now see, luckily it's a great time to be learning meditation and teaching meditation, because there's so many studies now and it's generally accepted that the benefits of meditation are scientifically proven. But one of the studies that's been done is on the ideal mental state from which to make decisions. And this is why we see a lot of corporate CEOs and executives learning to meditate now, is because they understand that the ideal mental state is restful alertness. So body is rested, but mind is hyper alert, hyper sharp, lots of clarity. And so when we've got stress in the physiology, so we're operating, we've had quite a lot of coffees because we just need to keep, buzzing. We're not in that rested alertness. We're alert, but there's also stress, and that's where we can make impulsive decisions, or we can make a decision based on stress rather than that clear, concise executive decision making.
And there's more and more like top CEOs that say they meditate. Like that's a bit the approach I have, because I know kind of the people who follow me would be more like doing competitive business school and trying to be successful in life according to our Western standards. But like people like, so Alan, thanks to Tim Ferriss, who's a very famous podcaster and very performance driven actually, and that's how I entered it. Like someone like Ray Dalio, who's the founder of the biggest hedge fund in the world, and like artists like David Lynch, or I think there's like Martin Scorsese, the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, and there's like if these guys use meditation for the productivity and they find the time to do it, I thought I could too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, then the other misconception is that, it's a very hard thing to do and only people that, are really focused and disciplined can do it. And
because a lot of objection I get would be, well, I've tried, but I can't still my mind, so I think it's not for me.
Yeah.
How would you tell these people?
Yeah, so there are many, many different types of meditation out there. I mean, I teach Vedic meditation because that's the one that I learned, and when I learned it, my experience with it was that, and you maybe talk about what you experienced when you first learned it too, is that it was very easy. When people learn, and I've taught all kinds of people, from people that literally, they're like, I can't sit still, and they find meditation very easy, to people that have practiced lots of different other practices. But it's very, Vedic meditation in particular, and that's the one I'm an expert in, so that's the one I'll talk about, is completely effortless. So it's very easy. It produces a lot of bliss chemistry in the physiology. So it produces a lot of natural bliss chemistry, the bliss chemicals being anandamide, serotonin, GABA, endorphins, oxytocin, all of those wonderful chemicals that we all want a little bit more of in our life. And interestingly, those chemicals have been, through the study of a neurologist called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote a very difficult name to pronounce, who wrote a book called Flow. And he talks about the brain chemistry of the flow state being very akin to the chemicals that we experience when we practice Vedic meditation. So because those bliss chemicals are running, it can often mean that meditation can feel quite blissful. And so you find that rather than, for a lot of people, it can be something that's self-motivating. You actually want to do it because you feel good during it, or you feel good after it. And yeah, so it's a lot easier to do than perhaps some of the more monastic style techniques, which definitely suit people that have a lot of time for contemplation, like you would if you were in a monastery. But it's particularly easy, and anyone can learn. And as soon as you learn over 4 sessions, and at the end of those sessions you're able to go off and meditate anywhere, anytime. And nearly every one of my students will say that, I can't believe I was able to do it. I was really nervous that I wasn't being able to do it. Some of them turn up on the first day and they're like, really nervous, shaking with the pressure of, am I going to be able to do it? And then I can't believe, and it's just because it uses a particular type of mantra, and mantra means mind vehicle. Man means mind, tra means vehicle. So it's like a little taxi for the mind, and it becomes very charming to the mind, this particular type of mantra that we use, which is different to mantras that you might hear in yoga and things like that. These particular mantras are designed for effortlessly stepping beyond the active sphere of thought. And that mantra itself is doing the work for you, essentially. So we don't use any effort. So therefore, it's very, very easy practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found obviously, I've learned with the Vedic method. I'm actually doing some courses where people start with apps and it gets them into it, because I know they wouldn't be willing to do the Vedic meditation course yet, but it's true that when you do the course, it's a bit expensive, but I find that the fact that you actually pay quite a bit of money makes that you're fully invested and really give it a go. And also the fact that you have a teacher to answer your question is really interesting, because it's very subtle, I find. Like there's a lot of little questions that you have when you start. And so, it's the way I learned, so I definitely recommend that Vedic meditation method.
Yeah, people just tend to find that it is different. They will often ask me, well, what's the difference between the apps that I'm doing? And you're really only going to see that when you learn it. But unequivocally, every single person says very, very different, much deeper, much more easy to practice. I think there's there's a couple of reasons why it works to have a teacher and be taught in person like that, and one is the receiving of the right mantra for you, and the other is that correct instruction from an accredited teacher. So I find that even people that have been practicing with apps for a while, there may even be just a couple of tweaks of what's the understanding of what's going on in meditation, in those layers of consciousness, why you're experiencing X, Y, Z, and when a teacher can tell you that, it sort of switches a light on, and that builds confidence in your practice. The other misconception, since we're talking about that, is that, you'll only be able to be good at it after many, many years of practice. And really with this technique, as you would have found too, Alex, is as soon as you learn at the end of those 4 days, you're essentially practicing in the same way you will, 5-10 years from now. So it's not something that you need a lot of time to get good at, which is often a barrier to people learning. They think, it's another thing they have to learn. It's going to be really hard. It's going to take me ages to get good at, and it's not the case with this technique.
Yeah, I found the first benefit I saw straight away was time management, because that's a bit different than the meditation practice in itself, which has way more to it. But just the fact of allowing myself to do nothing, doing 20 minutes, especially the one in the afternoon, made me realize I was more in charge of my time. So sometimes I'd feel a bit overwhelmed, and I prioritize all the time that meditation, and then I'd be like, well, actually, things are that thing I can do tomorrow and not do, and these things. So I think that was the first thing that people might not think about when they... Yeah,
it's one of the only things where you invest the time and you get the time back, because we spend a lot of time in fear and indecision, foggy thinking, wondering, well, what do I do now? Should I do that? Should I do that? Trying to make decisions. And because we've got so much stress going around in our head, we waste a lot of time. We lose a lot of time in terms of productivity. And so when you learn to meditate, people will report to me that they find they've got prolonged focus throughout the day, that there's a sense of, I just move from one task to the next, and I'm focused on that task and I'm engaged with it, and then the next one rolls on, rather than this, sometimes we get into a bit of, what am I going to do next? And we're turning around, and the stress just does it. Stress is not optimal for focus, for clarity of thought. A calm, clear mind is going to have better clarity. Meditation produces hypercoherence between the left and right side of the brain, and so that produces higher brain functioning. I mean, all of this has been documented now. It's natural that productivity, focus, better decision making, these things just come as a byproduct of clearing stress. And then, the other thing that people say to me is, well, I'm not really stressed, because we've now kind of normalized stress as this thing where unless we're experiencing a really big life event, like, I've lost my job, or I'm being made redundant, or I've got a major illness, or I'm breaking up with my husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, then we're not stressed. But actually we're all running, to a degree, this low level fight or flight chemistry. And
it's like a fish doesn't know it's in water.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If you're like stressed all the time, you might think you're not stressed. But
and stress is that chemistry in the body that shows up, and we get indications of it when we're starting to. Fatigue is a stress. It's a stress on the body. Fatigue, we're not sleeping well. That's an indication that the stress is sort of built up and it's not really getting the chance to release. If we find that we're experiencing even low level anxiety or foggy thinking, or just we feel like that there's just too much going on in our head. That we can't, if we're stressed, then the mind starts churning. When we're calm, then the mind's quieter. And so during meditation, essentially, we let the mind go for a run. It's like a dog. You take your dog out for a run, it goes and runs around the park. We take it off the lead, let it run for a while. Then when we put it back on the lead, it's much more well behaved. It's like, sit at the lights, okay, good. But if we don't give it that free run, which essentially is what's happening in meditation, then it's all over the show. We can't get it to focus. We can't use it in the best way. So,
just for the people who are live, don't hesitate to ask any questions. It's a good opportunity if you've wondered about starting meditation, why one technique and not another, why Vedic. And I'll go back to more your personal story because we jumped a bit.
Yeah, we jumped.
Yeah. But how did you make the decision to become a teacher?
Okay, so interesting. So I learned Vedic meditation. I had cancer it was almost exactly 5 years ago. Bowel cancer. I was 32. It was a bit of a curveball, as cancer is, but it gave me this time to sort of take time out and think, while I was doing all the chemo and stuff.
And just, if you've done the math, so 5 years ago, 32, so meditation makes you look younger, right?
It actually has been proven that the science shows that age reversal is one of the products of meditation. So yes, 5 years ago, cancer, had some time off doing chemo and things like that, and it really gave me a chance to kind of reassess my life. And I had started to look out, sense a deeper meaning to life and things like that. I was reading a lot of Eckhart Tolle at the time, and I was definitely having a deeper experience of life, glimpses of it. What I look back now on as merely glimpses of what my experience is now. And then, the chemo wrapped up and I got back to work and I was promoted and I was flying all over the world and I was very busy, and I started to feel the stress coming back up in my body, and I was starting to feel, that feeling that I used to, just the rushing everywhere and the kind of like constant, I've got to do this and got to do that. And I was getting, digestive symptoms again, and I didn't feel that good, and I ended up getting sick again with something else that was sort of related but not cancer. And I had another couple of months off work from a surgery for that, and I was like, okay, look, I really need to do something about my health. I'm sick again, and I wanted to see if I could find a way of stabilizing that deeper experience of life, that sort of layer of contentment that I'd felt sort of surprisingly during cancer. But people that, if there's anyone out there that's had cancer, or people who have, they tend to, they can have that experience where they start to have a greater appreciation of life, and I was experiencing that directly. But I lost that as soon as the demands went up again and I went back to work. It sort of started being chipped away at. And so when I got sick that second time, I was like, okay, I want to learn to meditate properly. I'd done apps and I'd done guided meditations, and they made me feel, I would describe them now, for my experience, they were relaxation techniques. Like I felt relaxed when I was doing them, but then they weren't having a major effect on my life outside of practice. That was just my experience. So then I was Googling meditation, and I Googled Vedic meditation, which is not normally the case. Most people hear about it from friends.
How did you come to Google?
Word of mouth is very strong for Vedic meditation, but I Googled it and I just ended up at a talk about it, and then I learned that weekend because I was like, this sounds like just what I need. And I had very good experiences with it. I felt radically different within days of practicing it. I used to clench my jaw in my sleep from stress, and in my first 10-minute meditation with Vedic Meditation, in that first meditation, I felt all the tension drain out of my jaw, just gone. And I was like, this is certainly the apps and the guided meditations weren't having that effect, and I was like, this is different, and it felt very deep. I'd never felt deep like that, and I just thought, this is great, I'm going to keep going with it. And I started to have a lot of different experiences. You know, colors were brighter, I just felt my baseline happiness lifting, a lot more energy. I'd kind of had chronic fatigue and things for many years, and always been looking for a way to have more energy, but hadn't really found it. And I sort of felt like finally I had this natural thing that I could do at home. I didn't need to go and see anyone, and it would boost my energy, which was great for work and all of that. So in terms of then how, after I was obviously having these great experiences with it, and then I'd been in insurance a long time, and I was starting to feel, I'd felt for a long time that it wasn't really my life's passion, so to speak. But I didn't have
not a lot of people.
No. Well, for some people it is. I mean, it can be very fascinating business, but for me, there was a feeling that it wasn't. It was a great job. It was a job, but it wasn't a passion. But I didn't have, like, you know, some people have the burning desire to be an interior designer or something. I didn't have a thing that I was not doing. I didn't know. But I had started to feel so good inside from meditating. Like, my inner level of fulfillment had risen to the point where I was like, you know, I'm ready to just take a punt. I was like, really, my thought process was that if I stayed on in insurance, I'd be so busy that there was no space for something new to come in. And instead of being so attached to the salary that I was being paid and the fear of what would I do, I sort of had that confidence within myself to just go, I'm ready to just see. I was like, you know what's the worst that can happen? I end up working in a cafe. I'm not going to be out of work. Not that there's anything wrong with working in a cafe, but I was like, you know, I'll just do what I need to do if that happens. But
worst case, you can even try and get your job back if it doesn't.
But when I left, I decided, I made a very clear call to myself. I don't want a parachute. I don't want a safety ripcord, because people would say, "Oh, you can always go back to insurance." And I was like, no, if I think that, then that's what will end up happening. I was like, no, I really want to drop in and take a leap into the unknown. And see what comes up.
I think both can work, because for myself, I was like, I like to have the worst case scenario to be like, well, I just go back to where I was. So at least, I'm like, that really gives no reason not to give it a go. But then as you go, it's probably better actually to burn the bridges behind.
And I didn't burn bridges necessarily, but I just didn't want to have that sort of, to me, that for me it felt like that would be half-hearted. It would be like, I'll sort of put one toe in the water, and really when you understand the mechanics of consciousness and how it works, when you take a firm step in a direction, then in an observer dependent universe, which has been proven to be the mechanics of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, how our universe operates. And certainly when you were talking about exploring the Veda is a 5,000-year-old body of knowledge that brought us yoga and meditation and Ayurveda and all of these things. It says the same thing, interestingly, which is now being ratified by science, which makes us feel a lot better. But I wanted to trigger those mechanics. Okay, I'm stepping in and we'll see what comes up. And so then, for me, it was that, I had this feeling to kind of go to India, which sounds like a cliche, and it's like, oh, go and find yourself in India and those kind of things. But I'd already found myself. I was feeling very good. I didn't need to go anywhere. It was just this sort of overwhelming feeling of like something's happening there, and I sort of went, okay. So I was wrapping up my job in insurance. I wanted to finish up at the end of financial year, which is because I had a senior role, and as that was wrapping up, and I was planning to make plans to go to India. I didn't know what was going to happen over there. I was just going to take some time, and I thought maybe I'll meet someone, or an idea will come to me, or I'll just give myself some space to explore what else I might like to do. And then I heard teacher training for Vedic meditation was on while I was there in that time that I was going to be there, and my immediate response was that I felt sick. Actually, I felt suddenly sick, and I knew that I would be going, but my mind hadn't really caught up to the idea. So it was very much, I mean, that's the truth of how it came about for me. I didn't really. You were saying, what was your decision process? I didn't decide it. It kind of became clear to me that was what was happening. And as, again, cliched as it sounds, you know, I guess a true calling is what you would call it, but it wasn't a calling that I sort of had recognized until really it was already happening. Then I realized, oh, okay. And, you know, after becoming a teacher and looking back on my life, I realized that everything that I experienced was leading up to that point. You know, the corporate career allowed me to experience that life and understand what many of my students are experiencing, and what it's like to practice that technique while being there, and what the effects are and what the pressures are. And all the illnesses that I suffered too, cancer, depression, chronic fatigue, there's a long litany of stuff. But I can relate to a lot of different reasons why people often come and learn to meditate, and have, you know, I've resolved a lot of those things through practicing. So I really, you know, it's been an amazing kind of looking back on the architecture of it all, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it's just how it works. Well, like people, they relate more to people who are, or at least have been similar to them. Like I know for myself, also learning with Matt, that we both know, the fact that he came also from a corporate world, that he was, you know, Australian, like resonated more than if, you know, like someone who had been living in the mountains their whole life was saying exactly the same things, because I would be like, yeah, but that person's a monk, and
or even you learn from, you know. There are lots of wonderful yoga teachers that become meditation teachers, but I know, you know, for me, when I was learning, that would have been like, well, you're already calm, you can sit still, you love yoga. For me, I was like, you know, I barely want to sit still for 5 minutes without a book, a phone, or something. You know, when I learned, and so, you know, I understand when people are like, I don't know if I even want to sit with my thoughts, and I wouldn't have wanted to either. So I get it.
So guys, if you have questions, don't hesitate. Joshua said, if you want to conquer the island, burn the boats.
Well, and another saying that I like is, you know, we can't discover new lands if we never leave the shore. So you know, you have to leave the shore behind. And really, you know, I talk a lot to some of my students, and, you know, whether they be, you know, early to mid-20s, millennials, or that are sort of suddenly finding themselves in jobs already that they feel have been more about what their parents wanted them to do, or what they thought they should do, or the way that they thought that they would make money, and then finding that it doesn't speak to them, like inside part of them is dying being there. Or whether that happens like it did to me in your late 30s or 40s or whenever it is, and you know, it's that period of time where you start to have a bit of it feels like a crisis, but actually it's your true essence is coming forth. And we want to know all the steps. When we want to go do something, we want to know, the intellect wants to know what's going to happen, how is it all going to work out, and is it all going to be okay, and am I going to make money? I mean, when I left insurance, I had no idea. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make money ever again, you know. And I probably will, you know, end up experiencing the same level of abundance that I did when I was in insurance, which if I had mentally thought, okay, if I become a meditation teacher, if I'd thought about it intellectually and made that decision, I probably wouldn't have made it, because I would have thought, no, I'll be, you know, I won't have as much money, and I won't get to live the lifestyle that I've become accustomed to, or whatever those intellectual ideas are. And often, you know, life has a bigger plan for us than we can perceive. And so when we take that first step, we can only see the first step. Then we put our foot there, and then when we lift the foot to step for the next step, then it appears. But the intellect wants to see the whole row of the steps and where it's all leading, and that's really not how the game of life actually works.
And just to defend a bit the intellect,
there's nothing wrong with the intellect. The intellect's great, but it can hold us back a little bit through conditioning and fear from what's speaking to us inside, that voice that's saying something isn't right with this situation, or I'm feeling to go in a different direction, or there's a feeling there, but the intellect's cutting it off, and that's where we lose our way a little bit sometimes.
But I just feel like, because I'm a very rational person, and I still am actually, but I feel like being very rational, you could also arrive at the same thing, because at the end of the day, even if you read a lot of books, think a lot about it, like it kind of makes sense that too much certainty is going to be very risky also for your life, and might make it boring. And for me, for example, even when I tell you when I quit my job, I did really pros and cons and thinking, and I find maybe I should listen more to just my heart and let go and not always think about these things. But I find that even if you like to rationalize things and do pros and cons, well, there's a really good case for actually letting go of a lot of certainty and for example, here I find rationally there's a really good case for thinking, well, I've read in a lot of books, money, social status is not what fulfills me. That's cognitive, so I'll go for
what's interesting about the pros and cons list when you mentioned that is often we find we're doing this pros and cons list and we sort of want them to come out in a certain direction, right? So you're hoping the pros are going to line up with the thing that you're really feeling to do. And really all we're looking for is we've got a feeling, and it doesn't need to be as sort of esoteric as the heart. We can talk about gut instinct. There's plenty of very successful entrepreneurs and businessmen that have taken risks and been very successful based on a gut instinct, which doesn't
Steve Jobs talking
exactly.
About it.
Yeah, he did quite well. The gut instinct it's not something that that makes logical sense necessarily, and yet it tends to work out in our favor, right? Because there's a feeling that we can't explain, but it's just I need to do this or do that or not go there or not do that, and so by listening into that gut instinct, then often we can find that's where our true desires, our true direction in life is coming from. In the Vedic tradition, we call it charm, charm that bubbles up inside us where something's a little bit more charming or there's a little bit of an aversion. And aversion and charm is really the indicators of the way that, we get that gut instinct, the way that we feel it. Then, because when we go and do the pros and cons, there is that feeling of we sort of have a bit of a leaning we're kind of disappointed when the pros don't line up, but we're that makes you realize what the thing that you really want to be doing is, and there is a truth to follow your heart, because your heart is that guidance system that's telling you this is the direction for you, I didn't listen to mine for a long time and got a few knocks on the head because of it.
It's true. But it's just a lot of these fears, they're actually irrational.
That's the thing.
They're not that, even if you think, it's actually thinking that about them is because sometimes people quitting their job, they think it's going to be terrible, but when you really think about it, it's not. So that was just at least that was my way to do it, but it's true that I've had when I was Tony Robbins events and things like this, everyone was stop, listen to your heart. So I'll take the advice at some point. So guys, if you have a question, be fast because we're gonna end there. Just last thing. So if you're interested, you give free intro talks, right?
Yeah.
So free intro talks in Bondi. When is it?
Yeah, there's not one for a while, but there are. There'll be talks in New Zealand coming up, and if you're in other parts of the world, then get in touch and I'll be able to point you in the direction of other Vedic meditation teachers around the world. And my website you can email me through that and get in touch.
So there's the website on the description of this live. Or
Instagram,
Or Instagram. And that's I think that's how most people do, right? I was like, well, I'll go to that intro talk. What's the risk? It's free, and you do what you want after. There's no
it's a good way to learn about meditation and what it does and why and how it's learned and all those things. And then, you know, you might learn something, you might decide you want to learn, you might not want to learn, but yeah, they're great sessions.
Thanks. I'll put back the music to conclude this episode number 21. Bit of music, it's always nice, and we always finish with a hug because
thanks, Alex.
we promote love.
Bye.
So thank you so much, guys, for your attention. As usual, there'll be the YouTube video, and I'll post it on the podcast tomorrow. Have a great day.
Okay, cool. I wonder how people